Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. It is 6:32. This is the public works session on August 30th, 2023. We are going live streaming here, that's what that is. But this is a public works session. There are no actionable items or anything like that. General information moving forward. Some of you know we are getting into negotiations, budget, things like that. So I think there's a lot of things that I've learned in a short time. And I wanted to go over, not just with the board, but the community who can refer to this. Since I've been here, maybe this hasn't been out, and it helped me to better understand a lot more going through these things and working with Bonnie and Jay as well. So we'll kind of move on. This is an informational, and if you have questions, write them down, interject where we need to, and we'll move forward. So,
Jay is.
This is Jay Staley. He is from Baker Tilly. He has been our consultant. Derek and I have met with him, Bonnie. His firm was part of the original field house project. Belvia came in and explained a lot of things. So, been speaking to him a lot, and we were talking today, and he said, you just want me to come here because some of this will segue into that, and I thought, man, it's perfect timing, perfect opportunity. He can get a lot more in depth with some future things.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So understanding the Southwestern consolidated budget, I think the first thing we want to look at is there are a lot of numbers and a lot of forms, and you get everything per month, but there's a lot of numbers, and if you're not real sure, or maybe not even explain some, I know a lot of you maybe own your own business or have at one time. This is different. It's a different beast. So I think before we move forward, we have to understand what information you guys have access to. In the public, this is all open to public record, but what we have and how we understand that help maybe drive our decisions here a lot better. So. You have this in paper form, this PowerPoint. Feel free to use which one. Statement of funds report. So on your, we have another exhibit here, Appendix A, right here. There's all the numbers. This is your statement of funds report. So this report shows the current balance in the education fund and total expenses year to date. So it says see highlighted Appendix A. So if everybody's there, our education fund, our expenses currently, as of 8/30, $2,678,004.33. And our current balance in the education funds, $3,205,354.64. So we kind of see where that's highlighted in there because there's a bunch of numbers. So this fund, this education fund, along with all the others, reflects the current balance at the end of the statement of funds report. Bonnie, feel free to chime in here. I know you explained it really well. Anybody have any questions where we are so far?
Just quick question, explanation on beginning year cash balance. Is that where we start and then we continue to receive revenue throughout the year after we spend it?
Yes, that's our January 1 balance. So if
Okay.
you take the year-to-date expenses and the year-to-date income, and that's how you come up with your ending balance.
Okay.
And then all of these funds, you'll see there, we have the operations funds, rainy day, textbooks, so on and so forth down. That adds up to the total on page 3. That's the total we have in all of our funds. And then, am I getting ahead?
No, you said page 3, we're not on Appendix B yet, but that's where we are there.
Okay, so on Appendix B, and these probably don't match because I use different months. You'll see the fund balance at the very top number, and then we add into that, we have a $40,000 CD that's not reflected, and take out the extent. So that is our book balance. That's how much we actually have going right now. So that's after we've paid all the bills. That's what we really have. And then on the bottom half of it, we take our bank statements from the checking account, the savings account, the investment account, the money market account, add those all together, and they should equal out. So that's how we know we're in balance at the end of every month. So
the big thing that was lost on me when I was trying to wrap my head around all of it, is that when you look at that appendix A, there are no actual accounts. I kept looking for like, this is an account, so there's this money and there's this money. That's not the case. This appendix A is just how we keep track of the money that is actually sitting in appendix B. If that clears any of that up.
So you can't say that, like, the education fund all comes out of the checking account. It's split up into all 4 accounts, so. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. No, that's great. So the education fund receives a deposit by the state of Indiana each month, as shown on Form 54, which is Appendix C. This shows what the state gives us. And the Form 54, which is this one here, Form 54 is based upon each school year as opposed to calendar year. That's also a tricky thing. Well, this budget here shows us different than what it is. Well, it's school year compared to calendar year. And so while sometimes you might think those numbers they're not matching, they're not the same, there is a reason, because the Form 54 is school year, correct? And then calendar year is our budget.
Right. And this also shows on the far right-hand side, we get money each month from the state that goes directly into our education fund. That's how our education fund is funded. So each month we get those payments. And then twice a year, they have student counts. So our ADM, average daily membership. That's how we're paid from the state, is so much per student. So say we have an influx of a lot more students, then they're gonna rework that to make it come up to what the higher rate would be. Conversely, if we had a drop in student, they would lower that number down. So that's done twice a year in October and February.
Does any of that go retroactive backwards, starting, say, August payment?
It's a yearly total, so it's just split up in 12. So if that is our new monthly total, then they're going to, yes, they're gonna retro it,
Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, if we end up saying, well, we lose 10 students between the October count and February, they've given us that money, they will take
They
that
will
back for
deduct
lack of being deducted.
Yeah,
Now,
from,
our monthly payments will be different.
yeah, they'll just take it out, they'll split it up between the remaining payments for the year, but they do.
Okay.
So like this August thing, it shows on Form 54, it says total net payment $383,809. And then you put that in the Appendix A and split it up into different
That goes,
categories, or where does it?
this one goes strictly to the education fund. These are our payments for the education fund. So that all goes directly into the education fund. Then, we pay all the bills and salaries and everything that belong to the schools out of there. Not operations, which is like if there's something that needs repaired, we need to buy furniture, none of that can come out of the education fund, but paying
Since
teachers.
this is an August 2023 Appendix A, I'm assuming that we haven't received the payment yet for the education fund. That's why it says month to date revenue 0.
I think Travis was looking for like a deposit of that, right? Where we
Yeah.
could-
I just was,
If it
I
would
just
show
wanted
up.
to see where it was showing up here. But it's not the end of August yet, so maybe you don't have it.
No, I have it, but
But you're thinking the 383 should show up in the month-to-date
I
revenue
didn't
for August?
assume.
Oh, month to date, okay, I'm with you now. No, I don't put receipts in, I do it once, at the end of the month, I put them all in together,
Okay,
so,
so
yeah.
it's just not in here.
It's just not in there, cause,
You ran the report before the end of the month.
yes,
Okay,
I have the money, I just have not added it into,
okay.
that's my month end stuff I put in.
When we get our August report, then.
Yeah, it will show that,
Okay,
absolutely.
that's where that goes. That's good
Yep.
to know. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so our current 2023 budget calendar year is $4,782,500. Currently, as year-to-date spent as 8/28, we have spent $2,678,004 of the total budget.
I wanna interject, we are strictly talking education fund
I
here,
apologize. Yeah.
so
We're not talking operation or anything, this is,
this is all strictly this whole evening's presentation is based just on that one fund. So we're not taking anything else into consideration, just that one. Go ahead.
So do you have a planned spend, that consumes that budget? Or are we on plan, are we above, below?
That's where it's going.
We're-
Yeah,
Next
we're-
slide.
we're getting-
I'll slow down.
No, you're good, no. So our projected monthly or budget amount, we spend 300, out of education, $334,750 a month.
Average.
Average times 12 months, $4,017,000. So, what that means is the current budget amount in the education fund, you see here at the top, the current budget amount minus the projected amount spent, the 334,750, that's the projected amount spent, is 83.99% of our projected budget percentage spent. Now, previously, our goal was, we want to stay around that 85%. Well, why? Well, at 85%, you have some cushion if something comes up. You know, you've got to hire 2 new staff members or create 2 new positions because of an influx of kids. That comes out of there. Or unfortunately, sometimes we see maybe there's something with HVAC. Then you get into that, moving that money out of education to there. So we've got some cushion here. So that's not 100%, so you get into, well, what happens to the other 15% every year? That money, if it's not spent, if it's not moved into operations, that's why we have such a healthy rainy day fund. That money, we didn't spend 100% of our budget, so we have this, I don't say excess because there's always something to spend, but that money is placed into that rainy day fund, which we have a nearly, 1.5 over 1.5
Right,
million.
when was the last time we put some in the rainy day fund?
I believe it was 2018, if I remember correctly looking at that. So it's been a while that we've had money left over. We built it up, and if I'm wrong with 2018, that
I
sounds
think
about
that's
right.
about right, yeah.
So our last
But-
transaction to put money in rainy day was, I believe, 2018.
And since we haven't been moving money
Yes.
to rainy day,
No, 2023, sorry. No,
or
it's 18.
transferring it out to operation, that's why we have that large of a balance in our education fund. I mean, we're getting 300,000 a month, which pretty much covers our expenses, and we've been spending 85% of that, so that's why there's such a large balance in the education fund right now. Used to be always, education and operation both ran about 1.5 million, so, and they kept pretty even. Then when we went to this, we were not moving that 15% over. So as it goes, operations totals have gone down, education levels have risen because we haven't been moving that money. And really, that's how the state sets it up, that 15% of it's going to operations. So they even plan on you to run 85% of education fund. We haven't made those moves because we had such a healthy operations balance in the past. So that's why you see there's 3 million in that account instead of 1.5 million that we would normally average.
But that's not gonna be the case by the year end.
Well, that's kind of,
We're in.
yeah. So a possible scenario,
So, I'm sorry, real quick before you
Yeah.
go on to that. So you're saying we haven't moved, we've kept it in the education fund and haven't moved it to operations?
Out of since that transition place has been in place since 2018, January 1, 2018, we have moved 3 times for a total over 5 years of $500,000, 575 actually.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why
it's starting to hit.
it's starting to hit, we're getting there, yeah.
Okay, because
So-
that was recent, 2022, right, that you started moving the money over?
Like
Yes, yes.
200,000 and 375, like in
Yeah.
two transactions.
Yeah, I did 200,000 last year, I've done 375 this year, so.
So a possible scenario is we can increase our 2023 budget spending from 85% to 95%. Now, you get into what I talked a little earlier, we start to lose a little bit of that cushion there. But the purpose by moving from 85% to 95% of our total budget spending is increase the corporation contributions to employee insurance coverage, premiums, and increase staff wages.
And this is just education funds?
This
that
is
you're talking
strictly
Strictly,
education.
yeah.
So roughly 4 million, you're changing 10%, so 400 grand you're looking to have
Yep,
available.
yep, we
So
got it
something
right
that's
here. So, the current budget amount, $4,782,500 in our education fund. Multiply by 0.95, 95%, if we wanna make that projected budget move, would be a matter of $4,543,375 projected amount available to spend. So if we do this at 95%, it will take us, projected wise, to $4,543,375 at 95% of the education fund. So if you take that amount spent at 95% minus the projected amount spent at 83.99, what we spent to date, that would give us an amount of difference available to spend, $526,375. That's from going from 85% to 95% in the education fund. So this increase of spending to 95% of the total budget, it does include the following, it's listed here. You've got the $526,375 to spend 95% of our total budget. And then we're gonna take away $59,162 projected for non-certified staff insurance, our contribution in the increase. And this does include that 2.5% increase in insurance from our insurance rate. So that is included there. This isn't this, oh, and then we gotta add 2.5% for our trust. So that is involved in there. So that gives us $466,838. Now, what that means, we have $97,838 for projected non-certified staff increases in insurance and wages. Where'd you come up, Josh, where'd you come up with 97,000 for? Because we're gonna do this across the board. If this is what we wanna do, increase premiums for all staff and increase wages for all staff. You got two different possible, you got collective bargaining money, and we have our employee for the non-certified. So, you've taken the 466 minus 369, because that is a projected amount of funds designated for certified staff and collective bargaining. This is not set in stone. Brad and Derek have been there, it's not set in stone. We've had talks, and this is the amount we discussed informally for collective bargaining. So that minus that gives these non-certified staff, that gives an amount that we divide up between the non-certified staff for insurance, wages, and salary increases. Because like I said, we wanna do this across the board, our contributions. Obviously, we don't have as many non-certified staff, and these numbers are based on 42 teachers / certified staff members. And jump in wherever, like that, there's a lot of numbers here. So of that 369,000, we say, hey, we're thinking we've got 369,000 to assist the certified teachers. Now, that can be 369, you can use that on insurance, you can use it on wages, you can use it on both. That's where the negotiations, and we're not even to that point yet. But this is just being open with you guys. But that 369 isn't the money you really have available. That isn't like, we'll divide that by 42 teachers and this is what we have, because you've got some deductions in there. So from 369, if our contribution is what I've sent out in board emails, of that 369, $90,315 is gonna be our contribution to certified employee insurance. Then you subtract the $33,100 for projected teacher retirement cost, $22,878 for projected Social Security, over $5,000 for projected Medicare, $1,500 for projected long-term disability, which gives us a number of $215,857 actual dollars that we, if we choose to negotiate that much towards certified staff wages.
Quick question, your 90,000, is that, why is that different from the 97?
Because that, and Bonnie jumped in, that is based on 42 employees, and we've already done that.
That's not your admin increase.
Correct, you are correct. That is that orange and white sheet, sit back a couple, that is for those certified staff employees.
It's appendix D.
Appendix D.
Which 97 are you talking about?
For the non-certified staff,
Yeah, so there was a premiums increase.
Yeah, this is separate, so.
Yeah,
correct. We got
Not
non-certified.
separate, but it's a part of it. So the if I'm remembering right, the 97 is all in for the premiums change. The 90 was just the certified staff.
You got it,
Okay.
you got it. Yeah, right up here where it says, projected non-certified staff increases and increased insurance contributions there at the bottom.
Hang on, Travis, you don't like that?
What?
The 97,838 is projected non-certified staff increase and their increased insurance contribution. That's how much,
Oh,
I understand.
Oh, yeah, you got written wage increase.
that's wages and insurance for them. So
You're right.
that's how we started out with the 369. That was after we take that 97 off. That's 97 for wages
Correct.
and insurance. So this 90,315 is just certified staff insurance, if I'm reading this correctly.
You are correct.
Yeah.
Projected certified staff insurance.
Okay.
Which was the orange boxes on your appendix D.
So if you look at appendix D, the insurance, orange and white,
And the total of the two orange boxes gives you the 9315. Because that is solely certified staff. And then at the bottom of page 2 of that, the 59,161 would be the amount spent for non-certified staff members.
and jump in if you want me to hold for just a few seconds while you review that, or questions?
Oh.
So is the 90,000 shown in D?
Well, if you add the two orange boxes together, there's your 90,000.
Your
on that.
57,674 plus 32,640.
Yeah, I tried to break it out there where it made a little more sense, to where total minus the certified, just to get the non-certified part, which was the 59,000, but yeah, the orange, add the two oranges together, that's your 90,000.
So this is what you offer?
Insurance wise, yes, because we had a minimum MOU for insurance that we can move forward because of open enrollment always came after. The wages though, Jerry, we have not gotten in, we're not allowed to get into that yet. But you guys approved last month the MOU to move forward to talk about insurance rates, because they're usually done after open enrollment, so then people are like, man, I signed up for this, if I had known we were gonna pay more, I might have switched my insurance. And our trust, our South Central Indiana school trust are the ones that set that open enrollment, and I asked about this, and their philosophy, I guess, if you will, as well, it's a shorter amount of time that somebody has to go with insurance if they just moved in or come from a different trust. So I always thought, well, why did they do it ahead of open enrollment? But they said, well, we don't want people to go without insurance if they're new and come in 2 months instead of maybe 4 or 5 if we set that a little later.
When is that effective? Because open enrollment's closed now.
Open enrollment is closed, it is effective in November, the first week of, I wanna say
And
it's the
open
10th.
enrollment closes tomorrow, so.
Yeah.
but it's,
All closes tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
for all intents and
So they would
purposes.
go from, you know, they'd have a shorter amount of time to go for insurance if this is their first job or whatever, instead of waiting till the end of the year.
Do some people not opt for some of this? What's the first page? Is that the medical?
The first page is the medical, yes.
And I know you said this, I just didn't write that.
No, you're fine. And I took the medical at the number of people we have enrolled now. And this is what, from there,
These are projections, so.
these are projections.
So you had 21 of the 42 enrolled in medical, is that?
Right,
correct?
that's correct.
Yes.
And then the next one is 27 are enrolled in dental.
Oh, yes. 30, 40.
Yeah.
Oh,
you've got-
because I took the dental, I'm assuming if we offer it for $1, everybody's gonna take it. So that's what I based the dental on, compared to, and thank Brad for the, pointing that out, but I fixed it to where the left side is what we have now, the right side is what we will have, considering everyone will sign up for it.
So you're thinking we'll be too short?
Say again?
Well, you said we had 42, right? And you only got 40.
Where's the 40?
If you add up the number of teachers, when I did this, that's what we had.
Okay, I was just making sure, I just,
No,
Yeah, no.
absolutely.
And we
That's
had,
Because I said we had
earlier you
42.
said 42.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
that's
it's
only
like
40.
now we've added the Spanish teacher and, you know, we've
Okay.
added, so there was 40 when I did it, so
Yeah, well, that's
I
fine, I
could
just.
projection.
Okay.
So that leaves us $216,000 for actual cash wage increase, correct?
Projected, yes.
Projected.
No, as we say projected, that's based upon current or even a few weeks ago,
Correct.
so it's not quite.
Pretty darn close.
Project.
But if more families, and I've already heard from teachers that they're looking to change, move from their spouse's coverage to our coverage, because now our pricing is better.
It would affect that total number.
So going from a single to a family
Family.
is significant for the
It
district.
is.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many are gonna do that, but
Sure,
it's.
we'll find out here pretty soon. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be the thing that will, I mean, that number could drop down, you know, it might wind up being 190 or something by the
Sure.
time you get increased contributions by more people switching over, but
But that also then takes away any opportunity for transferring over to operations, right? So we've transferred 575
It does.
over a little more than a year, this past year.
Yeah.
In the past 2 years, yes.
If we consider this 215 or 216 for wage increase, I mean, we're only leaving ourselves 5% now, right?
Right.
Of cash.
Which is like
a third.
700,000, so, wasn't that what it was, when we figured it?
Yeah, I've got it here later
Earlier.
on here in this
Okay.
slideshow. That, so the problem identification with the 85 to 95% is the sustainability. I don't feel that we can continue to do this annually, year after year, because of what we just talked, everything's fine until it's not
Oh,
fine.
okay. There you go.
And so, the problem with this, 1 year, this is all our money out of education fund, this is nothing but our own money. I don't feel comfortable continuing this year after year after year, going to 95% of our budget. So, the transfer of funds from education fund budget to operation fund budget is, it's gonna deplete that. I mean, in a matter of, in one big slide if something comes up. So that's why I say, I feel very comfortable with this from 85 to 95% for this year. I do not feel comfortable with the projected numbers we currently have to continue this annually. So, sustainability of spending 90 to 95% of our total budget. Just came on, just talked a little bit about the sustainability. This will lead us, if we continue this will lead us to overspend our budget and a potential reduction in the savings rainy day fund. If you overshoot your budget, that money's gotta come from somewhere. Where's that gonna come from? It's gonna come from rainy day, which again, boy, we've got a healthy rainy day balance I wanna keep it a healthy rainy day balance instead of taking that out to pay our bills. And if we continue at 95% spending our total budget, I project that's gonna happen. So,
Why wouldn't it stay there?
why wouldn't we stay where?
Why wouldn't it stay at 95%?
I'm afraid, Jerry, that if we keep spending 95%.
Oh, I understand
Okay.
that, but why would you get anybody to negotiate for less?
Yeah, I guess that's why it's called negotiation.
You told me you was gonna give me 95% of what you had, and you told me next year you're gonna give me 85, I'm like, nah,
I just tell that's just money we have available. I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, you guys did it before, why won't you do it again? I totally get what you're saying, but, you know, we have it this year, we can't. I mean, I don't know how that works. I've never been in negotiations other than this year, be my first time, but I do see what you're saying.
Why,
A whole
why,
lot.
why do you think we have it this year and we won't next?
Well, projected wise, I mean, we just dropped $525,000 in the last year. You'll see there's only a $775,000 difference when I get to that slide. I mean, that's not a lot of money, in my opinion, to continue to move forward with, if we continue to do 95%. You're 100% right. You did 95% last year, Edwards, why aren't we doing it this year? Everything's fine until it's not, until something comes up, and then we gotta break into rainy day fund because we had a chiller go
How
down.
many kids would you have to lose to fill that?
Right.
How many kids would we have to lose? Well, and was it 6,800 a kid right now?
It's on your form, 54.
What's on your- It kind of varies by district, where are you guys at on yours? So you're getting a little over $7,000.
Yeah,
a student.
7129. Which you can find on your 444.
Bunch of numbers.
You're doing good, I like it.
Bottom right-hand corner, right-hand one number.
So, I see your point, Jerry, like, you've done this before, what's the difference now? Why can you do it this year and not that year? I just don't find it sustainable because I'm afraid, I mean, one chiller goes down, what buses, things like
We haven't transferred anything to rainy day since 2018.
2018.
Anything. We put money in, but we have never taken anything out
That's
either.
fine.
Yeah,
Right,
so,
but we haven't had anything left over
well,
since
Yes.
2018.
we
That's
haven't
right.
moved anything because that's how we have that $3 million. We haven't put anything in rainy day, we haven't put anything much into operations. I can tell you, every other school in this county, because I have lunch with the treasurers once a month, have it automatically set up that 15% goes monthly into operations, because they cannot operate without it.
Mhm.
So, we've kind of run a little lean in operations sometimes, but we've always managed to stay with what we're getting in property taxes. But there's no cushion at all.
And the reason we're in this position to have the rainy day fund, to be able to operate off 85% and not to put on, to take out of education to operations all these years, is the due diligence of the former board. And the lady who's had her hands in the money for 11 years. I mean, it's a partnership, it's not knocking that, I mean, other superintendents. So the reason we've been able to do this and have these healthy balances for those 10 and 11 years to where we're only gonna run on 85% and this is what we're doing. I think the former boards were very fiscally responsible. Obviously, if they weren't, we would be having a much different conversation. So, I don't wanna go backwards. And the amount that we're taking, that we projected we could take out of education to put into operations is alarming to me. I think we are an educational facility, we focus on education, and when you take money out of education, you're removing programs from students, materials for students, and that does include staffing. So if you're taking money away from the education, and we're a school to pay for our utilities, transportation, all these things are facilities.
So the money transfer to operations, was that a decided upon, discussed thing and clearly understood why?
I can tell you, the,
I wouldn't,
every year at budget time coming up here in the next couple months, the board signs a resolution that I have the permission to move up to 15% as allowed by law from education to operations every year. So just whenever we run low, and had some extra expenses, then I'll have to move it. No unforeseen big expenses, we can generally run on what we get in property taxes. It's tight, and it gets down to, because we get our money, the end of,
So what caused the transfer over this past year?
just increase in
Cost of everything went
operations.
up.
So transportation, we spent a ton on transportation.
utilities. I saw
Utilities went up,
utilities.
you know, so just,
Overhead expenses.
Insurance went up.
insurance went up, yes,
Overhead.
I
so,
can't think of a single thing that's the same cost as it was.
yeah.
previous.
And I say,
It's just in general.
we've had to move it both post-COVID, so, I mean, there was a shortage of things for so long, and the prices were raised and raised and raised, so,
What if the rate of inflation stays the same for the next 2 years?
That would impact that.
That would
more
totally
difficult.
be right back in the same, you know, we'd be right back in the same boat, I think, at some point, if we
I
don't.
think that's
do
why you're not
something.
wanting to operate at 95%, correct?
I'm worried if we spend 95% of our annual budget, our yearly budget, that, and inflation's, I think the last time I heard, now maybe 11 to 12%, 11 to 14%. If it continues to stay that way, and we continue doing what we're doing, I'm worried we're just gonna have to keep getting into the education fund, and that's kind of what I need heads together, I mean, these are, ideas, but there are also, what can we do to combat that for the future? Yeah, I don't know, I can't answer it, it's a scary thought.
Well, I guess maybe I'm confused.
Mhm.
Are you wanting to do the 95% or are you not wanting to do the 95%?
I want to do it for this school year to get us back up so we can increase our employees' wages and insurance. But I don't want to continue to do that year after year.
Meaning you don't wanna increase their wages and insurance, and you wanna go backwards in rate, or?
Never once did I say backwards.
No. I think what it's
I
saying.
said it's called sustainability.
Yeah.
I get it, well, that's why I'm wondering what happens in year two, when we go back to 85%, if that's where you're wanting to be.
You got like 2 more slides to go. I was always in trouble in school for reading too far ahead, and I think the answers are coming in.
Okay. So, proposed solutions, and this is where I talked to our budget counsel, Bob Harris and company, Baker Tilly, which is Jay's here this evening from Baker Tilly. We have some solutions or proposals here. We can continue to operate as normal with increasing operations costs, and which is gonna limit our staff funding at this rate with our current ADM. We get more students, it obviously changes things. We can continue to move funds from education fund to operations, which, as we've talked, does remove some benefits for students. In 2022-23, this is the $575,000 moved from education fund to operations fund. Or another solution, utilize our debt service in the form of bonds to uncover the increasing cost in operations fund. Now, this is a short term. From my understanding, this is kind of a 3-year deal to get us through until we can get a little more healthier or alternatives. But when Jerry, you make a good, well, what happens if the rate of inflation? I don't know. I'm trying to get us through the next few years to see what we can do. I don't have that crystal ball. I'm not gonna say, oh, we're gonna do this. I just, that's a concern. But I don't wanna go for the next 3 years and continue to take maybe $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 to pay utilities, transportation, whatever those things might come up. So, and this is nothing we're voting on. We're trying to get this information out. We're trying to come up with ideas. So, We have some alternative options to address operations fund deficits, which result, if we're taking money and paying for our operations out of operations, it obviously results in more money in our education fund as we're currently operating. And that does include programs for students and retaining highly qualified staff and recruiting.
One of the questions that I had already asked him about this part, by going to that 95%, I think that's a pretty scary thing to hear because we are only giving ourselves that 5% cushion. The only thing that, and I'll have Jay kind of talk to this a little bit, when you look at that cash balance on our education fund and the rainy day, so that's that 3.2 cash balance and the 1.5 in the rainy day fund. Those are, for lack of a better term, kind of our cushion to allow us, if there are things that maybe instead of us, we go over to a 6%, we go over that 5 and wind up dipping into it some. That gives us that time frame to recover. Is that my correct statement in that?
Where do you get the money to recover from?
Yeah.
In case of,
If, say that there's additional expenses,
Yeah, but where do you get the money to recover from?
He's saying,
Kinda, I mean,
I think he's saying the
Take a
build
look
up
on
on rainy
it, we'd have to
day
build it back
and our current
You
education.
can't build up for 5 years.
the cash balance of our education
you know,
fund,
that money,
here's what I'm talking.
To me, you're comparing a big corporation, which you take in this kind of money, it's a big corporation, and these numbers sound big. But if you talk about replacing a heating system, it kind of, if you would think about your own household budget, let's just use it to make it easy. I make $100,000. I'm gonna save 5%. That's $5,000 that I hope to have left over at the end of the year. And if you're very smart, you're gonna go, screw that.
Not enough.
I wouldn't operate the hope that at the end of the year I had 5% left,
Yeah, I mean, it's scary to think about that that's all you have to operate.
because, I mean, one thing happens.
Yeah.
Well, let me see if I'm reading this right. So, you're proposing that we go 95% for this year. And then the reason that you wanna go back next year to 85% is if we use one of these tools, like
To get a bond or something.
debt service bond, which we're one of the few corporations that I've seen around that don't have rolling bonds all the time for reasons keeping us out of these pickles. And is that correct? So we'll be able to go, if we used one of these tools which would increase our property taxes, but it would also increase our revenue, so then we could go back to 85% next year, or whatever, 83.99%, and that would still be a larger number than what we're talking
Yeah, it's a
about.
percentage, 85% on this much money, but if we increase that 85%, like, you know, might be whether it's
95% of what we
95%
currently
now.
have may not be as much as, 95% of what we currently have may not be as much as 85% of what we hope to have next year if we do something like this, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's how those percentages work. I mean, you have more money, your percentage is a higher dollar amount.
So I guess that answers Jerry's
And-
question, is how could we go back to 85% next year? Well,
Only if we borrow money.
You're wishing you make more money than you do.
well,
You're hoping you get a raise.
Yeah.
Count on
and
it.
this is how,
so this is,
So you're saying you borrow money?
Yeah.
So how often do you borrow money to make payroll?
well, I can't borrow money and then get it back from the taxpayers, so that,
Well, you can increase your product.
Well, we're currently making payroll, and we can continue to make payroll. I'm trying to take a step in the right
I
direction.
understand that.
But we can continue to make payroll with what we have, but we can't, kind of like Brad said, so do we get raises the next year, or do we go back? If our funds don't increase, yeah, I mean, we couldn't give that amount. And not that we come come out of the gate with this amount every year. That's not sustainable either.
So leaving this year alone at 85%, we've already gone through the premium increase, because that's already out there.
Mhm.
So that's done and behind us. If that ends up at, let's say 150,000 increase instead of the 97 or so forth, where does that put us this year?
As far as what, Brad? As far as where does that
If
put?
we didn't adjust the 85 to 95.
Well,
Mine says we have the money in the education fund currently because we haven't moved any money over, but
Because
sustainability's not
we've
there.
been spending 85% of the total budget year after year after year,
Okay.
so.
So we've been on budget at the 85%. With the premium increase that's already been done, we're now over the 85% on education fund.
Correct.
Okay. So as the rules were set, or the pattern was set, we went over with the premiums increase.
Which is part of, though, the increases are figured into his 95% presentation.
Yo,
Okay.
going to 95, I get it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that part, the premium increase is already done, and we're still at the 85%. So, right, so we're on a path
Well-
to exceed that, or am I not thinking right?
no, because we're on the path right now, before any increase is implemented, we'll be at 85%.
Before the increase?
Before the increase, because there's no way to guess, you know, I mean, well, when I set this budget, I set it for what we knew, for the known variables. To me, the negotiated portion didn't exist when I set up my budget to do 85%.
Yep.
So the increases, yes, they're going as part of the increase to 95%. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So if we didn't touch the 85%, we're gonna be going over that from now on with the premiums increase, right?
If we never change anything, yes.
If we don't change anything, so, okay. But that premium stuff has already changed and will be effective in November.
November, yeah.
So we're gonna be dipping into rainy day one way or the other.
Well,
And I
Or the $3 million that's sitting there.
right, so we're heading down a non-sustainable, a long sustainable, but a non-sustainable path, if I'm thinking correctly.
with doing what we're currently doing.
With the new premiums.
Correct.
Right.
And that's why we linked up with Baker Tilly and to come up with ideas, how can we increase that? How can we increase our budget, if you will, less money coming out of education into operations?
Because in the end of the day, I think we've seen what has taken place by not providing the benefits, by not using the education fund money for the classroom, we're starting to see those results.
I think we would all agree.
As in turnover rate, difficulty getting qualified applicants,
You don't think other schools have that problem?
absolutely.
Okay.
To the amount that we are, I think we are struggling much more.
And what facts are you using for that?
I'm basing that based upon the wages. Comparing that, I'm looking at the comparative data from other schools, looking at the tenure of teachers at other corporations. I mean, that's just stuff I'm seeing personally.
The way I understand it, everyone has the same situation we have. They have uncertified teachers in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would think a lot, if not most schools have non-licensed teachers. You know, I think last month's report was there were 3,200 teacher vacancies posted on the IDOE.
I mean, to even imagine that you're gonna get, by giving a raise, you're gonna have all certified teachers next year, is a pipe dream.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably not gonna happen, but I also can't sit on my hands and not try to do something to do that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't do anything, I know what will happen. I feel I know what will happen if I don't try to make a step in that direction to get highly qualified teachers, and I continue to do the same thing. the law averages, tells me, in my mind, Josh, you didn't do anything, what the heck did you think was gonna change? If we do something, am I gonna fill, are we gonna fill those positions with highly qualified teachers? Let's be honest, probably not, but hopefully we can close that gap, but I know what we're currently doing. What I'm currently doing isn't working to get highly qualified teachers.
You're spending so much time just trying to get a position filled, the Spanish teacher,
Yeah.
for example, I mean, maybe wages, maybe wages won't do it,
Well,
but,
the thing is, they're not out there.
But I don't,
so what do you do, just,
I don't know.
Well,
but
they-
I don't
There,
disagree, yeah.
It's like trying to hire a mechanic, there's no mechanics to hire.
But I don't disagree, no, we're not gonna fill that position, because there's 3,200 openings right now, they're not out there.
I
But
mean,
if I don't do anything, if I do something, maybe the off chance I can grab something.
You're gonna have a lot better chance of poaching one from somewhere else though, if we can offer more money.
And-
More than we are currently offering. We won't be able to offer more than,
No, and this
This is
isn't about
not-
staying up with the big schools, there's no way,
but
and we don't even
we
try.
don't need to try to have an exact same wages as Shelbyville, that's a different ballgame there. But there will be people that will say, you know what, Southwestern is now close to Shelbyville wages, and I know what I'll have to deal with there versus what I have to deal with here or whatever.
I mean, I think just what we need to work towards is being market. You know, we're below market today. So, just getting wages and premiums and however up,
if
with
you have
the
to-
market, I think is appropriate. You know,
If you have to
what
stay at the
happens.
95% rate, how long is that sustainable?
Is what breaks.
It just really depends on a lot of different variables. First of all, like what happens, I mean, this year, if we gotta go out and buy 3 buses, I mean, that last one cost us what, 90,000, so, and I'm not saying will, but, or, something with HVAC goes down, or, and I say HVAC, because HVAC scares the daylights, I don't know anything about it, I just see dollar signs.
Well, the HVAC don't even scare me, I'll be honest with you.
Well, but,
What scares me, no, what scares me is the boiler system. Cause if that goes down in the wintertime, we're hosed. You can't have school, pipes start freezing, that's what I'm worried about. And the one in the high school,
It's junk.
I mean, we're barely holding on to that thing. I'm not saying that 95%, but I'm just saying, you talk about something that scares you, that's what scares me. Because if you don't get the heat on in there, dude, we're gonna have a mess. We can have school without air conditioning, they did when I was here.
yeah.
I mean, so. That's what I'm saying, I mean, we can have it, we can still function, it ain't, pipes aren't gonna freeze, we're not gonna keep going deeper in the hole. But you have the boiler system go out here,
Right, it goes back,
and it's the oldest system we got, how about that?
I'd rather have that cushion, that savings to say, the other day, they had to get new hot water here.
So,
Think about it, had savings, didn't have a budget.
Bonnie, check my mental math. So cash between education fund cash and rainy days, we're looking at about 4.7 million that we got sitting around
Correct.
on reserve, we'll say. So we're shifting 85 to 95, we're losing about 500,000, roughly,
Roughly,
a year.
absolutely.
So do the math on that with no upsets.
I think you need, I'm not sure, I could be wrong, but I think you need to take about $1 million off of that. Because this is calendar year, we have 3.205 currently, but by the end of the year, there's gonna be almost another $1 million gone out of there. If we're spending 211,000, that's just,
But if,
that
But we're
was-
also getting the $383,000 a month in.
Okay,
Yeah, so it-
hadn't considered that, thank you.
so looking back
So-
over the years, it's been a steady incline. I think last year or 2 years ago is more of an even 3 million instead of the 3.2, if I'm remembering right. So it's hovering there. So essentially we got 4.7, so you got 14 years of sustainability if we eat it all up, if nothing bad happens. Count on something bad happening, so cut that in half.
That's not buying a new bus, I know we're gonna have to buy.
Mhm.
So you're saying 7 years?
Right.
But you're just
Put a
talking,
5 to 7.
you're just doing the math for the education fund?
Yeah,
That is just
Okay,
cash of
so that's
education
not any
fund,
of the operations
Correct.
fund, which is where that
Correct.
would come from.
which is what we're currently transferring to. So you got, that's cash available in education fund plus rainy day. So 5 to 7 years of buffer there, and then around money.
So if you're running a business and you forecast that you're going to be out of business in 5 years, is that not good?
I think that's why,
I would say screw it right now.
Yeah, pull up now.
I think that's why he's talking about these tools and why Jay's here to explain some of those things.
So I think it's all in a good direction. I feel frustrated, the order of sequence. We've already committed the premiums, but we haven't made the adjustment to afford yet.
Well, you're part of that negotiations team.
I tried to be, and I wasn't included very much. And I've been asking for a month on how we're gonna pay for this.
Yeah,
That's
and
why
this
we
is
have
it.
this, why we're
This is
here.
why
That's
we're
why we
here.
No,
have
this is good, this is the information, this is good. This should have happened first, in my opinion, and then we could decide to make these adjustments to afford the premiums that we've already offered. Right?
No, makes sense.
That's how I put that together.
So how much does that give the average teacher a raise then? So I mean, you told me you already negotiated insurance, so cash value,
You know, and that's where, you know, we have that 215,000 divided by 42 teachers, but it really isn't, it's really not that simple, because if you said, I wanna give everybody the same amount across the board, let's say we said it was like $5,100. That between 42 teachers is about $5,100. So, but what you run into is Dustin's a brand new teacher, I'm not gonna give him $5,100, and then Gary's 10-year teacher's all gonna give him 51. So it's gonna vary, because we're gonna have, yeah, it needs to be.
The older teachers want more.
Sure.
Well, the older people want it all.
Well, not only that, we've
Sounds like maybe a
hired
5 to
teachers,
15%
Correct me if I'm
increase.
wrong, because of the way our last contract was structured, we have some teachers that have been here longer than new teachers that are actually making
less.
more money, or less
Less
money. We have some 3-year teachers that are making less than a.
Then we're
2-year
hiring
teacher.
in at.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to shore that up first and figure out how that 215,000 goes. Is that the way I'm, okay.
Yeah, it isn't as.
But that 215, how the one meeting we had, that ain't gonna cover it,
It would cover catch-up pay,
does it?
for sure.
Okay.
But I think
as far
it's
as
a
the
red
rest
step of that process. for
Yeah.
Are
sure.
there other fund buckets out there, incentive programs, teacher incentives that can be pooled into this? Or is that included in the education fund?
That's education. I mean,
That's already in there?
yes. So when we pay stipends and things like that, as long as it's not out of a grant, we said, hey, you know, she's helping with media special, that would come out of the education fund.
And
But the
that's already,
stipends-
those stipend buckets are already.
They were
included.
already in the 85%,
Okay.
so.
I'm gonna turn it over to Jay. We've talked a lot, probably more than you needed to, but
No, it's a good
this is,
conversation. Yeah.
and these are things that
Right.
have some different solutions as well. So
Yeah.
This is Jay Staley.
Yeah, so again, Jay Staley with Baker Tilly. So before joining Baker Tilly, I worked at Clark Pleasant School, so I was the assistant soup there. I don't even know where I was at soup office. 12 hours. So I've been in public ed for the last 26 years prior to doing this. It's kind of, my lens is more from an educational perspective maybe than a finance piece, but you guys are wrestling with similar conversations to everybody across the state. How do we find staff? How do we keep staff? And so it's all those conversations trying to figure out where to make the dollars match up. And so just from a historical perspective, 2018 was when all the funds changed. So in 2019, we get the new education fund and the operations fund. The operations fund being the old CPF transportation bus replacement, but you had the old general fund, which had these operational costs. And so custodial salaries, other operational piece, this building, the majority of it is paid for as far as staff. It's paid out of, or would have gone to the operations fund. So the way the state set it up was dollars were gonna come into the ed fund, just like they did to the general fund. But they peeled off these expenditures that they were in the general fund that are now in the operations fund. And the expectation was the dollars would just flow over to cover them. And so from just a blanket statement, they said, you know, that we think that's about 15%. Some districts that's higher, and some districts it's lower. But so then the state came in once they were seeing how much money was getting transferred and said 15% is the max. If you transfer more than 15%, you're gonna be on the naughty list. We're gonna come out, we're gonna have a conversation, you're gonna have to tell us how you can get that down to only transferring 15%. And so, as time has gone on, so since if we go even further back, 2012, when you start looking at per pupil funding in the state, it took us until 2020 to get back to what the state was funding in 2012 levels. And so you had inflation that was just above where schools were able to keep up, and we all know what's happened with inflation since then. It's just continued to get wider. And so as it's put more pressure on the education fund, because you're trying to keep up and give pay raises, dollars aren't coming in, and so people are starting to turn down that spigot to where it's no longer 15% they're transferring, it's 10%, it's 12%, it's 6%, and it's just putting more pressure on the operations fund. Well, then as you start putting more pressure on the operations fund, so that you can keep as many dollars as you can in the education fund, because the state hasn't provided that funding, now you're dealing with facilities, you're worried about boilers going out, you're worried about HVAC units, you can't fix roofs and all these other pieces, because you no longer have the dollars to do it. And so, unfortunately in the school world, besides bake sales and fundraisers, there's not a lot of extra revenue that's out there. And so it just becomes, how can we find additional dollars? So with the state making the changes they made with, as far as dollars following students, whenever enrollment decreases, that's dollars that are going out the door. And so then you get this tug of war of trying to recruit students from other places. And then, or you just have communities that are shrinking just because our population is shrinking for the most part in 70% of our counties. And so you're just trying to, it feels like we're just always chasing something, trying to be able to put a plan together. As you guys are in a good, sound financial position, which gives you some abilities to be able to move forward. So that's a good thing, because you have healthy and hefty cash balances. My fear is the state's gonna start looking at those cash balances. So whenever you go through a rating call, so if you go to issue debt, most schools use Standard & Poor's or S&P, some places will use Moody's or Fitch. But they look to see what is your cash balance and what they consider your operating funds. And so your operating funds they use as your education, operations, rainy day, and if you have a referendum fund, they would include that. They want to see a 15% cash balance between all of those funds. So when you add them up and you say, hey, this is all the dollars that we have going out the door in a given year, we want to see that you have a 15% cash balance as kind of that fluff. And so if you do, we're going to give you a check mark and you can move on. If you don't, then it doesn't necessarily going to downgrade your rating. It's just kind of where they look at it to boost up or give you the highest rating they can give you from a governance perspective. So when you look at your cash balances, you're well above that 15% threshold. As a smaller school district, you probably need to be, because an HVAC system cost or whatever it may be is going to be a larger impact to your cash balance as a percentage than it would be where I was at Clark Pleasant, or when you start looking at one of the Marion County schools or something like that. So running yours heftier as far as a percentage is not necessarily a bad thing. And so one thing you may want to consider as you start going through these is, where should that be? Where do we want that percentage to be? So as we start talking about building a box to make those decisions, I think that's one that's important, is where do we want that operating cash balance to be, so we know the dollars that we're able to allocate either to operations, to pay raises, or to whatever. So that's one conversation I would encourage you to have over the next period of time to try to establish that amount. As far as other levers that you can use, and so this is where we got talking into, okay, if we can't use bake sales and fundraisers to raise the money, what else can we do? What else is out there? And so you can utilize your debt fund, but as you mentioned, it is, I mean, are you truly leveraging debt to make payroll, right? So you're paying interest to make payroll, or you're doing that to make payroll. So on the debt side of the house, it has to be a capitalized piece. You can't borrow money to pay things, so you're trying to find a way to shift a capitalized expense out of operations to be able to pay it from debt service. Some easy things in the school world are buses. So if you're currently buying your buses from the operations fund, if you move it to the debt fund, you can pay it off on a bond or a master equipment lease. There's a few different instruments as far as how you borrow to be able to pay for it, but it frees up money in your operations fund. If you free up money in your operations fund, now I don't have to transfer as much from education to operations to be able to make that transfer. So it's trying to figure out how to make those funds kind of all work together, instead of in isolation. Another option that is out there that people have explored is doing an operating referendum, so that's another one. And so conversation as we were discussing, should you decide you want to try to issue a general obligation bond to cover some expenses out of your operations fund, first and foremost is to make sure that if you use your debt fund, make sure you identify facility needs so that you're taking care of them, because you don't want to tie your debt up into just general obligation pieces where you're buying furniture and buses and whatever, and you're not able to take care of boilers and chillers and roof repairs and that kind of stuff. So just making sure that you structure it so that you're able to truly take care of facility needs, because you don't want to lose that capacity. That would be
So
one
have you
piece.
done
Yeah.
any type of evaluation on us of where we were? I thought we had some earlier discussions that we were gonna have an analysis or a review of where are we bleeding? Kind of sense out of our operations fund. Do we have expenditures that we shouldn't have?
As far as dollars going out,
Yeah.
not that we haven't had that conversation as of yet, so we
Oh,
will,
okay.
yeah, we will sit down and discuss that to see where those might be bleeding.
Eric or Josh, I thought I was remembering that being a part of this. Is that,
Yes,
am I
so-
not remembering that right?
So Bonnie and I went through the operations and said, hey, we've spent 40,000 out of this or whatever. So when we identify our part, we give it to Baker Tilly to say, yeah, you can cover this here, because they have access to a lot of our things here. So we went through, transportation's a big one. That was the biggest, what we paid drivers and overtime, and a half, or extra miles things. So we went through to identify those, give those to them to say, what can we do? What can we take out of the debt service, or,
Yeah, not so much that. I guess I was thinking that we were gonna look at how can we spend less.
okay, yeah, what Bonnie and I have done is identified what we're,
We identified
Averaging money out.
where the biggest increases were from previous years, and it was utilities, kind of thing, and transportation. Those are hands down
Okay.
the biggest chunk of it.
And one of the utilities that we did look at, so we put the district in contact with a energy consulting, Maverick Energy, and so they were looking to, can you buy your natural gas differently, and is that a way to save some dollars? So we had a district that was purchasing it basically rack rate. They were able to move and buy it to leverage it through a buying contract with a consortium group. They saved $45,000 this last year in order to do that. So I know they were kicking the tires on that. The company was doing the analysis, but I'm not sure where it was at. They're waiting for
they
some
kinda hit
information.
some, yeah.
So I guess so are we doing reviews of, so that's different ways of buying.
Ongoing, correct, yeah.
So that's different ways of buying something. How about actually buying less natural gas? If our boiler is a pile of crap, do we need a more efficient boiler?
Like, yeah, energy efficient.
Because that would be less natural gas. So
Yeah.
those types of considerations and thoughts, what and how are we attacking those? I don't know what our electric is, but going through a bond or debt service to put together a capital project on a solar project or something.
And if,
Bad words in this town. So we're gonna put it on top of the roof, which needs redone anyway, so, you might be able to get 2 or 3 stones with, or 2 or 3 birds with one. But just that type of thought, how can we spend less?
I mean, traditionally, all the discussions I've heard in reference to what Southwestern's corporation spends, we always spend very lean. As far as, we save good, we spend lean, that's why we have the cash balances that Jay was talking about. And when you were speaking to those, you were talking about the 15%. What was our number that we're at currently?
so we currently have a cash balance of 3.2 million, right? And you were showing a budget, you were gonna spend $4 million, so,
Yeah.
Right.
85, 90%
Right.
cash balance.
How
Is
much?
what you're currently setting?
We're
North of 80%, I'd have to calculate it real quick. Just in the education fund. So if you were planning to spend 4 million, right, that's roughly what you were attempting to spend. You have 3.2 million, it's at 80% cash balance is currently where you are in your education fund.
A few years ago, and I can't quote who the superintendent had, but the superintendent asked us, the board, the people on the board, would you pass a resolution that the superintendent must maintain a 15% cash balance? And we voted it in, and of course there's other things I've known what happened to pass don't apply today. But that did happen, and that's probably why it's always been.
And so that's probably the root of the 85% rule that I came into, of how we run our budget every year at 85%, so.
My interpretation of it, you know, I can't judge on if the 85% is right. You know, we'd have to talk more on it, but we have 80% cash to budget, where we're only expected to have 15%. It's great we have all this cash sitting around, but we're suffering from it.
But at what cost, right?
Exactly, at what cost? So we're now bleeding because we haven't maintained an efficient system, boilers, to keep our operational costs at bay. So great, we got a bag of cash, but our operations are going up, you know, I mean.
But that was just
If you got a
education.
fan that's getting ready to burn up, it's eating up your electricity. So you replace it before it's broke because it's costing you a fortune to operate the thing.
That, when you was talking about there, that was just education fund.
It's fine, I get it.
And, you know, the operations, we run
Our
very, very.
operations is the same, we got 1.5 million sitting in rainy day,
What,
we got 500 sitting in operation.
what exactly is wrong with the boilers, I guess?
Well, I don't know, I'm just saying, he just mentioned that he was scared of the HVAC going out as a big expense. I guess my big expense would be the boiler, not the HVAC.
Nate came in here, I don't know, Tyler was here then, so probably 4 years ago, something like that. And I know that that guy from Nate, he actually came to the meeting too. He said, your pipe, it's either over the ceiling or underground, I think it's underground.
It's underground.
All the way, all the way across there, he said, we replaced 10 feet of it, he said, the whole thing is rotten and it needs replaced, it's going to go.
At
And
that time, that pipe, 4 years ago, if you look at 4 years ago, that pipe was only 10 or 12 years old. I do. Cause we got an all new system put in.
So I guess it'd be interesting to see, there's firms out there that can help you do a study on your utilities based on square footage and what you should be expecting. And if we're 2-3 times on utilities, what we should be expecting, because either we're buying it wrong, but I would just, again, look at consumptions and what we're actually buying.
It could also be like a building envelope, similar to your home. You know,
Yeah.
you have heat,
The insulation,
Everything, right.
are the windows
Right.
leaking, and, you know, are the UV resistant, you know, we can put shielding on all the windows to improve the AC utilities. There's ways.
Right.
That you can cut 5, 10, 15% in a lot of places. So,
No, you're good. I guess as far as the negotiations piece, just one thing of note on that front is the way the negotiations is set up is new money is all the obligation is in order to negotiate. So whenever you get your DOE 54 report, and you compare it to last year, so when you get your projection in July, compare it to June, whatever the difference is the obligation that you have to negotiate in good faith. So any additional dollars that you would have in cash balance or whatever is not something you have to take a look at. So it's the quote-unquote new money each time that you go to the table. You can define also new money as if I had 10 teachers leave and I replaced them with 10 less expensive teachers and there was another $75,000 of savings, that could also be negotiated. Because you also have a funding floor, so that's one thing to be cautious of as well. So if you give pay raises, once you establish a funding floor, you have to meet or exceed that funding floor the next year. And if you should do it with stipends. Once you do stipends consecutive years, and that then becomes a part of the base pay. So just some things to keep in mind as you go through the negotiations aspect. But from the bonding perspective, if that is a way that you, I would just be cautious with it in that, make sure that you're transferring things out of operations that you're paying for so that you're freeing up that money. You're giving yourself the ability, maybe that's a better way to look at it, to spend whatever part of that 15% you're holding back towards salaries. Because if not, it's not going to do you any good. If you're looking at the bond to say, okay, what other things can we add? It's gonna have to be to get to the 15% that you're holding back, or it's not gonna do any good to address wages.
You're saying to make sure recurrent costs, we're trying to make sure we're utilizing this for recurrent costs, so that we're not taking the money
Right.
out of education.
Or the one-time thing, so if you're buying buses out of operations, if that's something you're currently doing, then you can certainly move that to the bond and be able to pay for it. But to say, hey, the boiler's going out, we're gonna replace it, I don't think the boiler's going out, but just, that's not something you're currently paying out of operations. So that's not going to help you as far as trying to generate or free up money to be able to give pay raises with.
So your bus is the one, we know that's
Right.
somewhere on the horizon, we've discussed that, I mean, whatever that looks like.
So, man, it looks like that, your 15% is roughly $700,000, I think, right? So that's
Mhm.
kind of ballpark what it is. So I guess, and that truly, that's the question on the table is, can you issue some bonds to take care of some operational needs so that you can spend some of whatever percentage you feel comfortable of that $700,000 that you're currently holding back for operational costs that you're just allowing to currently build within your cash balance. So I think that's the kind of
When
question.
that bond's paid off, Laura,
Pardon?
when that bond is paid off,
Yeah.
I would just say, you know.
So it kind of goes back to what I think it was Travis that mentioned earlier. So we see a lot of schools that are reissuing those. So they put them on a 3-5 year, whatever that rotating calendar is to be able to rotate them. So to get the pot of money, you're using it to supplement or backfill, and then when you get that one paid off, you're gonna issue another one, whenever that one goes away, if that's the path you wanna go down. It could be a situation where if you take out the bond, and depending on how you set your tax rate, we also have seen school districts that took out the bond, they ended up raising their tax rate to do it. Once that bond paid off, in lieu of issuing another bond, they went to the community and said, would you be willing to do an operating referendum? Because now, if you get the operating referendum, you can distribute those dollars however you want to, plus you're not paying interest on anything. It's just dollars coming in.
So we're only 7 years though, right?
8 years.
8 years?
8 years.
So
And then you-
then 8 years you're back.
back doing it again. So none of it is a guaranteed revenue stream coming in. There's always gonna be an end period with either option you would go down. People that have chosen to do the bond first, so let's say they raise the rate 10 cents, and then if they go to the community and say, hey, we'd like to do a referendum for 10 cents, it's going to be tax rate neutral, because we're gonna let this bond pay off, and we're gonna move the 10-cent rate to the operating referendum fund. We've seen people that have gone that path. So it truly just depends on the flavor of the community and what, how the board would like to approach that.
So, the 85%, that includes the extra benefits that is proposed to give to employees?
My 85%
No.
was based on what I knew at that time, so that was all included in the change from the 85 to the 95.
Whatever.
I said it's included in the change from 85% to 95%, but it is not included in the 85%.
So what would that percentage be, just not including raises?
Just insurance and.
Yeah, so what adjustment would be needed to cover the
$100,000 divided by 4 million. Right? 0.5%. Just the back.
What do you say, half?
Our total increase,
Okay.
benefits that
25,
Yeah.
it's right about 150,000.
I'm still trying to get all-
150.
The thing
85
with
and
100 grand
32.
though is, that's based on yesterday's numbers of the new rate. Now that we have a
You
new
bring up a
rate,
good point, it's gonna be higher.
now that we have a new rate, more folks are gonna sign up for it, we're gonna gain a couple teachers somewhere along the road. You know, those single participants that become family, that was, I forget the number, that was significant growth of contribution of single to family. I got 20 grand in my head, I'm not sure that's right. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what percentage now.
Would that be just for teachers that you're talking about, or is that all employees, or?
Well, I think just teachers, if I remember.
Thanks.
All employees were getting that rate, the insurance premium, I believe.
Right, but we're just talking about the education right now, so we're talking about the $100,000 could become 200,000 really easy.
Because it's education fund, we're just talking about the
Yes,
42
you're
teachers and.
Yeah, it
I'm
wouldn't.
not being right, I'm trying to be clear, so.
No, but, okay, you're clear.
There's a question slash clear.
Sorry?
It was a question slash am I clear here, so.
Oh, okay. Yes, I think you're right. So.
Easily turn into 200.
So in planning, for planning purposes, we're 200 grand in the hole for sustainability.
So that, based on the percent of the budget, if you have $191,000 worth of cost, I'm just spitballing these numbers, that's roughly what it's in that ballpark of what the
Right.
overall cost would
Yeah.
be. You know, that would be an additional 4%, so you'd be from that 83.9 that we're at projected, so you'd be 87.9, so 88. So as we sit, that is where, and when Bonnie and Josh talked, that was what they felt that they were comfortable with that.
So,
For this time.
so coming in to maintain where we're at today with the new premiums, we gotta adjust the 15% to 11%.
I mean,
Yeah.
and that's never, yeah,
Is that
and
right?
that's not like that was a hard, like, line locked in, that was just the way that Bonnie had that was what she had felt comfortable with, and that was what.
I mean, you're right, that's your 4%.
No, just wanna
Yeah.
understand what we got ahead of us. Well, we're in the whole 4%.
Right.
Because of that change, so 200,000 out of education fund. You know, I mean, sustainability, we don't have to do anything and drain out our savings of education fund and we're good for 10+ years, but after that, we're out. So, of just that amount, ignoring the pay increase.
Assuming things stays the
Stay
same.
good, yeah.
If they don't stay same, then.
Then it's shorter, yeah. No, it's a bad spot. That we're now in.
I guess I don't feel like we're now in a bad spot.
We have to make a change.
Correct. I agree. We do.
We
but
don't have, we
we've
don't have a
known-
choice, right?
We've known we had to make a change. I mean, there's been big discussions, you know, there's been plenty of discussions about things that need to change. I mean, we have all kinds of that talk. So, I mean, it's just a matter of how we go about it and looking at these numbers and trying to figure out a way to
That's fine, I mean,
buffer things.
just over the past month, we've been talking about what can we afford? And it was said that we can afford this, and without change, we can't. So we'll have to make a change. And, I mean, yes, we've got buffer here, so we've got some longevity, but this is how I'm reading it.
But you're also not taking into account any sort of change in assessed value over these years.
That's right.
I mean, there's plenty of things that can also, I mean,
You got
that
all the
number-
gambling, you got all the gambling out there that could happen in a positive direction, absolutely.
Okay, so I guess I have a question. So we've been saving in that account 15% every year. It's just sitting there building up. So if
Except this past year.
I'm talking now.
I'm sorry.
Please don't interrupt. So if we continue on doing, let's say 90 instead of 95, we have 10% extra that we could transfer over to rainy day or
Operation.
operations, or it continued to just sit right there in that fund.
Right.
So, I know we all wanna look doom and gloom, but also, we could still be saving 10% every single year and remaining with a cash balance.
If we go to the 95%, you would be able to save 6%.
Okay. So still, I mean, it's not the worst, like,
No.
we're not spending 100% and we don't have any extra, because where we're at with, let's say we go to 90 or 95, that's still not touching that savings, right?
Correct.
So that savings is still there. If we did the debt services, then we have extra for operations, we shouldn't need to pull out of the savings in the education or the rainy day, but if we do, it's quite a bit of money. And then we're still saving 5 to 10% from the education money that comes in.
Except this past year, we transferred the 575, which, 10% roughly.
Over the last 2 years, because I did it in
Oh, okay.
22 and in 23, so
The
that's
575 total, so 5%.
200,000 in 22, 375 this year.
Okay. So averaging 5% a year, we've moved over. So if we stay playing with all the numbers, we need to adjust 4% to cover the premiums. We're getting into a pattern of moving 5% to operations. So that leaves you 6% of savings.
Then if we do the debt services, then we wouldn't, again, knocking on some wood here.
Yep.
We wouldn't necessarily have to transfer from education to operations.
Right.
Correct.
Because we would have extra available.
So
Yeah,
that's
that would be the goal.
there.
So right now, today, that would gain you 5% back, so now you can save, I don't remember the numbers, 11% to the education fund. As we have been doing 15, it would now be 11, because we're covering the premiums, and then the 5% transfer gets picked up by debt service.
One thing you have to wonder if we hemorrhaged $200,000 last year, we jumped that
$375?
$375,000 hemorrhaging this year.
What is the next?
That's a $175,000 increase in 1 year, so does that become $525,000 next year, and then $700,000 the next,
Absolutely.
is that the rate of inflation Jerry was talking about a little bit ago, is that, is the hemorrhaging going this way?
What would that percentage be?
Well, it's gonna change every year.
Well, I know, I mean,
I don't know, I haven't just come to me.
So we're
Like,
right around 5%
Emergency
right now.
purchases, typically prices that you buy.
We did buy bus this year,
Right now,
so there's 100,000 of it.
if you average, we're riding 5%.
Yes,
200 to 375 is about a 60%, 65% rate.
I think when I did that, I think it was like 575-ish, it was in that ballpark. If that percentage increase
Again,
again.
Right.
Which is why it's so paramount that we look at this stuff now and make some sort of adjustment, make some sort of a plan for the future.
so in
Because-
transfer, that'd be about a 3% increment each year. So we're riding 5% today, it becomes 8% next year, 11% the year after that. That'll table off somewhere.
So were there big operations purchases those 2 years?
That's what I was thinking, like a bus, I think we bought a bus each year, so, I mean, that's 100,000, give or take, for each year. So, that, no, it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't in, what we planned to have. I mean, yes, every year in the budget, we build in the ability, the state allows us to buy 2 buses. That's what we build in every single year, just in case something happens and we have to buy a bus. So we don't always necessarily buy 2 buses every year, but it is built into, that's one of the things they make us build in to the actual budget is, are we gonna buy any buses? So, but saying that, the last 2 years, we bought big buses. So, not even the little activity bus, they've been big buses. So, that's
Is
exactly.
that a continued activity? I don't know what our strategy is on buses. I think the drivers own them today, right?
You're correct, today on theirs, if they them around, if you will.
Right, and so are we looking to start providing buses and only hire drivers to use our buses? Is that the strategy or?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's,
Long-term, I think
Long
that's our
term,
only choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Probably the only option.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're gonna run out of folks that have buses.
There's no-
Yeah.
Right.
we're gonna have a fleet, they're gonna look beautiful, and nobody drives them, you know? But, and I think that's
I
where,
could see where it could come out in 1 year, you might have to buy 4 of those.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of people out here that can't afford it, or even finance a $100,000 bus,
Yeah.
but they can drive, so
That's
guess
what
what
Yeah.
we're.
that's what I'm getting at, yeah.
Right.
So I completely agree with keeping that in the budget though.
Talking about the activity buses, we have 3 of them out here currently, which were, from what I'm seeing, just looking, which means we're at least 1, if not 2 short. And the 3 we have are just near to junk as you can get.
It's time.
You've had to call a record, what, 3 times here in the last couple of months?
Really?
3 times in a month and a half.
And, yeah,
What was wrong with them?
one of them blew a radiator hose up around 44.
For,
And that turned out to be something bigger than
Something
that.
else, yeah. And then the other one,
was overheating.
it just kept overheating. It was a different bus. I mean, it was just overheating when they were driving it, so it was like, don't drive it anywhere when I get it.
They got a lot of miles on them. They had way more miles on them than I ever dreamed.
Some of that's just maintenance.
Sure. Don't disagree with.
Probably even,
I think one I stepped in the other day had 300,000 miles on it.
those buses are like 1-ton pickup trucks.
Yeah,
Those gas or?
they're glorified gas.
They are, yeah, they're
Yeah.
gas.
They're glorified vans.
Yeah.
But you know, those.
They're van
those-
chassis with a tank of a shell on top.
Yeah.
So I mean, it does get into those, some options that we're looking at for buses. We know we're gonna have to do something.
So what are the,
Buses.
what are the next steps of figuring out what needs to happen as far as evaluating facility maintenance plans, upgrades, fixes, repairs? You know, let's look at some efficiencies if we're making it hard on ourselves by using a 60% efficient boiler when there's 95s out there available.
And when do you expect to have an official, this is my superintendent recommendation to the board? When would you guess that to be?
Well, I think definitely get some more homework done from Jay and his firm and to, like Brad saying, well, where are we hemorrhaging money? Is it because the boiler system's over our lights? Are they, I think needs to be more education on what we need. And we're prioritized to do, what is the top priority here? Hey, man, you guys are, your boilers are not efficient and when they are going.
I guess, is that something you do, Jay? You go through our everything or not?
That's not something we do. We
Okay.
can recommend some partners as far as who you may consider. I don't know if you have an architectural firm, construction management firms, or some energy efficiency groups out there, so we can help put you in contact with someone to do that.
Okay.
But to me, I want to have that done. The question then just becomes, as far as if you want to go down the bonding path, when you do it. So if you want to get it into next year's budget, so if it's something you want to be able to get into next year's budget, as far as starting to pay on, you're gonna need to act soon, because everything has to get done, closed, buttoned up by December 1st. Is when everything has to be to the DLGF so they can put it in your budget. If you wanna say, hey, we're gonna wait and do the facility study first, and then we'll figure out the bonding after that, you can certainly do that, and you can wait until next year. So it's not something, it just kinda depends on when you want the funds. So if the intent is to get the dollars so that you can address pay raises, then it's probably a more pressing issue than it is if it's a longer play to figure out where we are from an efficiency standpoint, then you're probably waiting until next year to do it. So it just kind of depends on which is more pressing.
Is it acceptable to have 2? Can we do a smaller one to cover pay and insurance and so forth, offsets with education, and then we do a different one for facility?
You could, but I wouldn't advise it, just
Okay.
because you're gonna pay cost of issuance fees twice. So
Oh,
you're gonna pay financial advisor fees, bond fees, underwriter fees, if you
Got it.
issue 2 bonds. whereas you'd be better off from an efficiency aspect to issue one larger one. So, bonding capacity, so there's two ways to go through bonds throughout the state. You can either do what's called a general obligation bond or a first mortgage bond. And so a general obligation bond, every community has a capacity of what you can be able to go in debt for. And it's all based upon your assessed value. There's this little formula you can concoct. And so you roughly have about $2.2 million of bonding capacity that you could take out through geo bonds. Certainly if you wanted to do a projects that were more than 2.2 million, you could use what's called a first mortgage bond process. And so Indiana statute put this into place in like 1950s, where you would have a holding corporation. I think you guys may have
We
one
do.
now. So you have a holding corporation that meets so that you can issue more than that debt. So I think what was being proposed was looking at a $2.2, $2.1 million geo bond and trying to secure some of the things that you knew you wanted to do, that you wanted to move out of operations and take care of some pay increases in the short term. And you can certainly, it's still gonna give you some capacity. The question becomes, where do you want your tax rate to be? So if you said, hey, we wanna do this, but we want a tax rate neutral, that you're not gonna be able to do. It's gonna require some kind of tax increase. It's just,
Do you have that information, Jay?
we started spitballing some numbers. Some of it's gonna depend on how quickly you wanna pay it back. So certainly the longer you extend it, then the longer you, or the lower the tax rate can be, but it also means more interest that you're paying over that period of time. And so we were running some initial numbers at, I think it was a 5-year payback period, I think is what it was, and it was around 20 cents. So that put your tax rate somewhere near where some of your area schools
Which is
are.
what?
Because your tax rate now is
Right,
19
The-
cents, right?
The number they were talking, so right now, the last one I pulled was a 0.7. And so we're by far the cheapest at that 0.7. The next is a 0.86 from Triton. So by adding that 20, we would be going to a 0.89 or 0.9, depending upon how the last numbers rounded out. So it would be just barely above Triton, but still significantly below all the rest of our surrounding
A
schools.
lot of the others were around like 1.1,
1.3.
1.3.
The average across the state is about $1.05 in 2023. That was the average
So
across the state.
So we're well,
When we put together, so this 2.2 million, does that need heavily itemized?
No, so the bond council, so Ice Miller is the bond council that you've been working with, and so they write it very broad. So if you have some specific projects, you can list them, but they can put in, bus purchases, they can put in HVAC renovate, they just kind of say any and all properties and whatever projects you kind of come up with. They write it very broad to be able to do it. The one thing you can't purchase is software, so software you wouldn't be able to purchase, hardware you could. So if you are currently need to, buy Chromebooks or do some of those kind of things, you can tackle that as well. That's something else you can buy out of there.
That's something-
Furniture.
Chromebooks, is that something that's out of Ed Fund right now?
Operations.
That's operations already, okay.
And the other thing to keep in mind, so whenever we started looking at that 20 cents, it keeps you at 39.9 total debt rate. The reason that's important is in this last legislative session, they made a change to typically bond issuances have historically, I guess I should say, been by project amount. So they look at a total project amount. If it's below, I thought a number, $6 million, then you're, as a board, able to decide what to do with it. If you give it the thumbs up, it passes, you move on. If it's kind of between the $6 and $12 million number, it becomes subject to petition remonstrance. And so if there's taxpayers that don't want this project to move forward, they can go collect signatures. If they collect enough signatures, then it turns it into a signature collecting campaign on your side versus their side, whoever gets the most moves forward. And if it's above that threshold, it becomes subject to
How
a.
come we didn't have, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
How come we didn't have to do that to do the new gymnasium?
It becomes subject to, so as long as people don't remonstrate against it or force it to a referendum, then as long as they don't push back, then you're okay to do
Yeah,
it.
we had no pushback, that's why we had no election.
So that would be the same thing here?
Correct. But the geo bond that you're looking at is gonna be below that threshold, so there wouldn't be any type of remonstrance piece. It would, you'd
They
just be
can't
able to
grind.
give it a thumbs up, right?
They can't drive.
So even, well, they can
They
drive,
can.
so.
They can drive.
Ground and stand.
You could just make it, you could get it to go forward.
Well, we wanna be responsible about
Right.
that, for
So the 39-cent piece now comes in, because if your debt rate falls between 40 and 80 cents, every project, regardless of the price tag, becomes subject to the remonstrance process. If your rate is over 80 cents, then all debt you take on has to go to a referendum. And so there's school districts that have an 80-cent tax rate. If they wanna do a
That's
$2
why
million
it's on the ballot,
GO
right?
bond, it goes onto the ballot now. So, I would advise you to stay below that 40 cents, just so you don't have to open yourself up to
So,
additional process.
I'm sorry to keep.
Go ahead, you're fine.
What, where are we at now? You said, staying.
I think you're at 19 cents in your debt
So
rate.
that's gonna give us 20 cents, so
That gives you at 39 cents is where you.
how much total money? would
How
that
much
be?
capacity did you have? I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I wanna say it was about $13 million roughly in capacity that you'd be able to issue at that rate based on your assessed value over a 20-year period, assuming no assessed value growth.
Is that our new assessed value? Because they just come out from the state
It was not, it
Like,
was based
That was
on,
before.
it
3
was,
weeks ago.
it was based on 2023, not 2024.
Okay.
Yeah, based on that 2023, and I believe it was a 3-year payoff.
Was
what
it that
they
quick?
discussed.
3 year, yeah.
It was a 3-year, and it was a likely principal of around 2 million, tax rate of about 19 cents. And so, I mean, that was because we wanted to keep it short, because we knew this was something we were gonna need to readdress, because this is kind of a Band-Aid for a larger, longer solution, I guess.
So is that still the plan? This is a short-term fix to allow us to get to a long-term plan?
Correct, yes, I mean, to me, that is.
Why,
I mean,
why
that's
would
right.
you go that route?
And your long-term is a referendum, or?
I mean, it can either be like you talked about how other corporations have those revolving bonds.
He's not,
I mean, if
he's
that
not
was that.
suggesting the referendum.
Right.
Right, no,
So
so,
why would we do that? If he's against it, I'm not for it.
Right.
right,
The 2.2 million max, that was on a 5-year,
It was on a 3-year.
there's
a 3-year, so if we expand that year count and maintain our 20 cent,
If you expand the year, it would bring the rate down, because the 2.2 million
Right,
is the
so-
maximum you could borrow anyway, so it would just require a less rate if you wanted to extend it 5 years, but you're gonna be paying more in interest.
okay, I'm missing that. 2.2 is the max, but earlier I thought you said 13?
So we were talking about capacity, how much
Capacity.
could you borrow? And so you would have to use a first mortgage bond,
Got it,
not a
okay.
GO bond, to get to that 13 million, if that's the capacity number.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was the recommendation, as far as if we were to travel a bonding path. This was kind of that 3-year, $2 million principal, that was kind of you save the amount in interest, and you could revolve that if you needed to, as time went on, if we didn't find a different way.
Who recommended that?
That was, I was Ice Miller and Baker Tilly.
So 3 years would be up before you even got the project done.
Well, it's not necessarily a project, and it's not one project, it's talking about shoring up our operations so that we're not having to pull money off of education.
So you're just talking about borrowing money to make payroll?
We're talking about utilizing our tax base to educate our children, is what we're talking about. That's what it is.
I think what Jerry's saying,
That's just a sneaky way of putting it.
Put it how you want, there's only so many.
Well, I mean, the average person out here, so you're gonna raise my taxes so you can make payroll.
well, my answer to that would be, no, we're gonna keep the payroll money over in the payroll department. So that we can use this tool to keep the building and the ground
To cover up.
exactly going for the future. Because we have enough money, if we keep that, quit hemorrhaging it, we have enough money to make payroll and make pay increases.
Yep.
But as we keep going like this on the amount of money that we're gonna have to start draining out of the education fund, then the answer's gonna be no, we don't have enough money to make payroll.
Yeah, but like I said, that's only 3 years, it's gonna be, it'll go like.
Well, what these other schools do, because I've asked a couple other board members,
I know
what,
some other schools that can do things like that, and they are in financial trouble.
well, I talked to a board member that's on Nineveh, Hinkley, Jackson, Thomasburg is his name. He's been on there as long as I've been on
I
this.
wouldn't believe anything the school board member told me.
No, mark you off the list. Yes. Yeah. They keep these things, so we get $2.2 million and we earmark it for operations. It's a 3-year payback, and then in 3 years, we borrow the money again. Or we use what you say and say, hey, look, taxpayers, we can do this again, and we don't have to have your permission. But we don't have to use a whole bunch of it in interest and fees and all this crap. Or you let us keep the tax rate exactly where it is now, and we get to keep all of the $2.2 million for ourselves to use to better this school corporation.
So I would think the intent here with this GO bond 2.2, whether it's 3-year, 5-year, whichever, we would just keep re-upping.
We would either keep re-upping it, or we would do what he said that some corporations do and say, will you give us permission to just keep the tax rate here where it is now?
Right.
I don't
Which
understand
goes
why
to
you
the
wouldn't
referendum,
do
right?
projects that you thought are needed. I don't know if the boilers need to be, but that's something, I would think you'd wanna look at all that stuff. And instead of doing this 3-year thing, and then in between time, we'll find out, okay, now we gotta borrow more money, cause we gotta fix this. You know, why don't
Yeah,
you
the thing with
isolate these things that are gonna be needed in the next 3 years or whatever? And, cause it's gonna, like you said, it's gonna take a year to get,
Right, it's gonna take some time.
Yeah, and then it's gonna take several months after that to get it bid out and get going and.
Well, we're not actually going to use this $2.2 million, if I'm hearing this correctly, for any major project. We could earmark it and say that we wanna borrow this because we think of the boiler, because we think we're gonna have to buy 5 buses, because we think we're gonna have to do all these things. But in the meantime, we can use it for things other than software to keep from hemorrhaging the education fund. And then, if we do spend all this $2.2 million in the meantime, and then the boiler goes out, talking chicken now. Boiler goes out, we have $1.5 million in rainy day fund, and the extra $3 million in the education fund that we can use for major
Emergencies.
things
Yes.
that aren't budgeted into this $2.2 million.
Yes.
So for me, the next 3 years with this money that we're getting, we need to show that our school corporation is using it wisely. Whether we intend to redo the bond in 3 years, do a referendum in 3 years, we need the taxpayers to see the results of where their money's going in order to, so, yeah, these projects are great, but if they're seeing highly qualified teachers in the classroom because we're not taking that money to pay for that,
But then if we're not, we still have the same turnover rate, what are you gonna tell them?
we suck.
I just wanna know what you're gonna tell them.
Yeah.
You're gonna have the same.
It's better to try.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess my thought is it's better to try than to just,
Status quo is not workable, I'm sorry.
no, you're fine. I actually wasn't done. Sorry. It's better to try something and rather than just sit back and say,
Throw your hands up.
we know we have problems, but what do we do?
The overarching theme was, you continue doing what you're doing and fail slowly, or make some changes to try to make a difference in the classroom, which is what we're here to do. And feel free to jump in on what your theory is on the course of this.
Yeah, I mean,
Ultimately, it's gonna be your recommendation.
basically, said the same thing as far as, I can't sit on my hands and not try something and expect a different result. If you try and you fail, if I try and I fail, hey, maybe what's another solution? But if I sit here and know there's an issue, in my mind, not speaking for anybody else up here and saying that there's an issue, but in my mind, if I feel like there's an issue and I don't do anything about it, then it's shame on me. That's my fault. Again, I'm not speaking for anybody else up here. When you're taking money away from the education fund to keep the buildings open, man, that's a tough one. I know that's just part of it sometimes, but I can't sit and do nothing. expect for us to improve. Whatever that solution might be. And I guess that's part of why we're here tonight. What is the solution? Or what can we try? And if it fails, like, well, then I guess we gotta go back to the drawing board and see what we got.
I'm just gonna throw all my cards out on the table as one of 7 board members, and I'm not speaking for anybody but myself. I'm simply waiting till you get your homework finished and all that, and you come back, cause none of this stuff even means anything to me until a recommendation from the superintendent, and that's you, comes to me and says, here's what I'm proposing. We've kinda got most of the why here, or some of the why at least, but this has to come from you. You're the captain of this ship here, and so
I won't bring you anything that I don't believe in.
you better not, or
Well, this is no offense to you,
No.
absolutely, and you know that.
Yeah, I know you're.
But I'm gonna tell you the same thing I've told other superintendents. When things go sour, you'll go find another job, and I'll be sitting here eating crow.
You've been doing this several years and been through, I'm sure, a lot.
So it's a team thing, you know. It's,
It is.
and I respect what you said, but it's a team decision. And I don't wanna put it all on you,
right. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
but it's like a bus driver said one time, and this applies to teachers too. You give me $5,000 more and I'll be a better bus driver? So you don't think I'm a good bus driver now? So, and everybody keeps, they say better education, but yet I've not heard, we've had a principal in here and you've been in here, and I've not heard anybody say, well, boy, we need to replace this teacher, because they're not doing a good job. But if we give them $5,000 more, they'll do a better job. I don't believe that. Because they wouldn't be a teacher to start with. Will it hire younger teachers? Doubt it, because as soon as, it's just like my daughter got out of nursing school or a nurse practitioner. People are calling her with that. And she says, well, here's what I was offered. And they go, we'll beat that by 20,000.
I'm still waiting to hear, at least just my standpoint. Jerry said at the last meeting, you know, that you bring it to me as your recommendation, something you believe in, then I'm gonna have to find a reason to not get behind it, because we hired you to be the,
Well, that was recommendation on personnel.
oh,
To recommend, I'll tell you right now, to recommend to borrow money for 3 years, I'll vote against it. I would flat vote against it. I think it's ridiculous to think 3 years is gonna sustain. 3 years will go by so fast, it's like your kids growing up. I can remember when my 6-year-olds were 3-year-olds, and it's like, damn, what happened?
Sure.
So what would be your idea to solve this problem?
To look at what we really need, if we need boilers, to look at those kind of things.
More project-based.
More project-based, it's gonna improve the school. Then take that money, like you've talked about, and be able to move some of that money in to help out. And to me, basically, you've done told the teachers that you're going to 95% is where you're at. And if they don't know now, but they will in the morning. And they will not expect any less than that.
They already know, somebody's already told them. It wasn't me, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying.
Well, you're
I've
right.
already got a phone cut from it, they already know. That's what I'd like to know
This is
where
the
it
first
came
I've
from.
heard of it, so.
That's what I'd like to know. Who told them?
So with the
This is
3-year,
public, so.
3-year loan, that 2.2 million, does it have to be spent within those 3 years?
That's what I'm saying.
So there's an arbitrage calculation that has to occur, because you have a period of time that so much of it needs to be spent during that time period, but not necessarily all of it, but the majority of it would be over that period of time. So I guess if you're thinking through 15%, I think 15% we've kind of calculated is about $700,000. So if you're basically over a 3-year period of time, $2.1 million, so you're in essence trying to create that 15% of the budget to be able to spend 100% if you would borrow that amount.
But basically though, and correct if I'm wrong, to borrow the 3 million, we gotta act right now,
You don't have to act, in order to be
before
able
December
to,
31st.
in order to get into
December
next
1st.
year's debt rate, you have to act now. If you
That's
do,
right,
if
that's
you,
what I'm saying.
yeah, but if you sell it, let's say you wait till next April to do this, or next summer to do this, or whatever, then it'll go into the next
Right.
year's
Well, that's
tax
what
rate.
I'm
So-
talking about, if you
yes.
wanna do the 3-year, you do it now, but if you wanna, new boilers, whatever you think, then that's next year.
Or you could even do this next year. So there's no, if you need
Okay.
time in order to plan it out, you have cash to do it. So it's not like one of these things, I mean, we've been in board meetings where people weren't going to make payroll at the end of the year, and they had to do a different type of borrowing to be able to just be able to make payroll. And so you guys aren't in that situation at all. So, and I guess as far as the 15% piece, so holding back the 15% is just continuing to build that cash balance. Well, the cash balance is sitting at 80% now. So where's the target that you wanted? So at some point, you're gonna have, if you continue to save the 15%, if that's where you spend, you're gonna have more than 100% cash balance compared to what your expenditures are going out the door. My fear is the state, as we keep leaning on them, we as educators saying, we need more money, we need more money, we need more money. We're gonna point at our cash balance and say,
They're not gonna get it.
quit asking us for more money and go spend what you got.
We're not gonna get grants, we're not gonna get funding.
Yeah,
Special things, we're
Right.
not gonna do much.
Right, and so it's just trying to figure out where's the balance, because you certainly want to have cash, because you never know when emergencies are gonna pop up, but what's the prudent amount, I guess, and so, I would say if you can't get behind it and support as far as in a group, then I would use what you have, because you still certainly have a way to get there, and it's not a decision, I wouldn't force it, I guess is where I would be. Just
So,
so you can,
quick
honestly.
question, so let's say this gets pushed out to April,
Mhm.
the start of it or the approval of it,
Right.
however it works. And you said it doesn't start in the tax rate until the following year. Are we still capturing that money in April? I mean, are we
you
still,
could, yes.
are we still
So-
capturing those spendable dollars right away and then taxes don't kick in until the following?
Correct, you
Yeah,
could,
'cause
yeah,
they're
so,
behind on your taxes.
Yeah.
right, so
You
you
can't
can,
be, they can't add on to your taxes what, from last year.
The taxes you pay in arrears.
The taxes, the tax papers you will get this year are taxes from last year.
so if, let's say, you ran through that issue and you sold in April, May timeline next year, that's what you did. You could get the money then when you closed, and you're actually gonna start paying the following year. If you push it that far into the year, you can avoid what's called making quote unquote an interest-only payment in December. And so the way you would do that is using cash balance you have currently in your debt service fund. If you sell January, February, March, oftentimes you'll need that because bondholders that are buying these are gonna want a payment. But if you can push it till April or later, then you would be able to get the money then, but not pay on it until 2025 in that
Okay.
aspect. And then you would make your
It'd be
two
better to
payments.
wait
That sounds reasonable.
a
Pardon?
few months. It'd
Yeah,
be
yeah.
better to wait a
Correct,
few
yeah,
months
that way you
instead
don't
of
have
doing
to
it
pay
in
down,
December.
yes, right.
You're saving yourself some interest.
So, yes, you're, in essence, if we're not gonna get behind it and do it before December 1st, we should wait and do it in April.
Correct.
So either do it right now or wait to do it after.
Correct.
Okay, 'cause
Yep.
I know you said that twice, but I
Yep,
don't agree.
yep, you are correct, yeah.
What happens to these things that the board votes on, and this is the second one that I know of, that we voted on, just like, we voted to, that the superintendent, and the superintendent wanted us to pass that so that they could go to the union and say, I can't pay more, I can't, than 85%, because the board, that's what they voted. Well, where's that at? I mean, it's just, to me, it's a waste of time for the board to vote on those kind of things. If it's not, where's it written down at? I mean, it's just like I make a motion now for something, you know, and then 5 years from now, well, I remember making that motion, so what? So you did, who cares?
Well, luckily now it's gonna be all live streamed and archived, so we'll be able to go back and watch it.
Well, So are you saying kinda like after the fact? I mean, is that?
I mean, if you voted on it, who automatic, do we vote again, or it just automatically changes because we don't pay attention to it?
Was that a one-time collective bargaining decision by the board, I guess, is maybe what you're asking, or was it?
No.
I mean, how could a board in 1990 be making decisions for us
Right.
today?
Is it written policy somewhere? Is that
That's
what
what I'm
you're
trying
saying?
to find out.
So-
I don't know the answer to that.
Policy for the board to approve the teacher contract, right?
Is that what you're talking about? You have to approve the team.
I'm trying to make the title,
Well,
you're
no,
talking
yeah.
about the
Now, that would
85%.
be up to date, that would be easy to look up and find out.
Sure.
I'm trying to understand what you're asking on the 85%.
Because the superintendent asked us to make a ruling that she had to keep,
Oh,
he, she, whatever it was.
so when did that policy
Yeah.
change, is what you're asking?
Yes.
Or did it, or?
Was it ever even made into anything?
Is it still in effect?
If there's nothing to override it, yeah.
But it was
Is it
never
as
written
simple
down.
as making them up, what's that?
If it was never written down and never put into a policy.
If it
we
was
don't have
voted,
a vote.
if it was voted in a board meeting, it was written down.
It'd be in the minutes, I mean, it doesn't have to become an actual policy.
Right, but unless we
And it
keep
was the
track.
same as another thing that I talked about, that your spouse could not work here at school.
Brought that up, I think, the last board meeting.
Yeah, we did bring that up.
Something like that. Yeah, so what I'm following is, you're saying, where did that go? If you've done that past,
I mean,
how did it vanish?
what was the point of voting on it?
Yeah, I don't know, other than going through former board meetings, going through the minutes, I wouldn't know any
I
other
mean,
way,
that would
Jerry.
be tireless.
Yeah, I don't know how there would be otherwise, other than now when you adopt policies, we have them and they're, the church and field policies and things like that, but as far as, hey, we voted on this years ago.
Well, as far as like the policy that you guys decided you wanted to vote in a policy that said we couldn't hire family members of board members. So when we voted on that church and hill nepotism policy, that overruled the old one because that got rid of the Neola policies and brought in these.
So I
Yeah, I
wonder,
understand that.
So like, if that's something that you wanted in there, then at that time you can say, hey, this is something that we have, so.
and you're referring to, at one point, we said superintendent had to keep a, cash balance for 15%, where did it go? Is that still not a thing, was it a thing?
Was that an annual thing, or do you remember? Was it 15%
That's
of
just
the annual?
the superintendent asked if we would vote that in because they, he, she, whatever it was, that was a negotiating point with the union that they couldn't go over that limit. And whoever the superintendent was tickled to death because it's out of my hands. I can't do nothing about it.
Well, definitely not ever
But
looked at.
unless the motion was written as such that you can't do this forever, then it sounds like that was a one-time negotiating tool by that superintendent. And I guess you could read that either way you wanted to read it, but.
Well, I don't have a copy of it, didn't read it. so-
Easy way to fix it, so just vote again on where we want it to be. So and that'd be off your recommendations as you bring it forward of how to get us through, the next calendar year, it sounds like, to get this bond in place and plans in place.
Well, hopefully, is there any more discussion on bonds, anything of that nature? But, well, do you have anything more to bring as far as, an update, or we talk about it more next meeting, whatever, or we bring a recommendation?
And I'll touch base with Jay some more and see what's going on. Touch base with some board members to see what thoughts, and not say anything, but you have some really good questions. And then, these are things I'm learning as well. I'm not gonna say, well, I know what it's called,
That's fine.
Yeah, well,
Understandable.
No, I understand. There were questions that everybody's asked. I'm like, I never even thought of that. But that's why I got to learn that as well. I can't not take action and think, well, I guess we'll just wait for myself professionally and personally as well.
At the end of the day, if it's something you believe in and you want us to bring it to us. Thank you.
I just ask keep the communications open.
Thank you for stopping. I wasn't gonna say.
Thank you very much.
When you called it, that I was still talking, I was
I don't
gonna just let it go, because I typically do that, but I just can't do that off.
Sometimes that happens ahead of my brain.
No,
So
I
I
appreciate
talked
it.
over Jerry and I had to stop, I talked to Josh, and I had to stop, I talked to
I appreciate it.
It was a lot nicer to you for stopping you